Testing, testing. Council Chambers, mic test.
just like check the volume on it.
Yeah, my favorite part is towards the ceiling. It's really, really cool.
I just want to check volume levels. That's kind of loud. I'll stand back here.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command.
Sounds good over there. And by turning on the table mic, we're able to hear the keyboard pretty well. Yes, that would be.
Oh yeah, no, and it's really we want to hear more.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh no, it's cool. I have some actually things. Singing like all day, every day. So.
What's your input set? Right? So the piano, what's your string?
answer team before it starts.
Where are you guys from?
Ashbury.
Ashbury. Good place to be from?
For the most part.
Where are you from?
I mean, on a Wednesday morning, like, away from is kind of nice. Out of cash? Oh, yeah, he's big.
In your class, yeah. Tell him when you go back to see him, say you were down here hanging out. Council chamber and ask him where he was. I know he did some work for us last summer.
Davis. Nikki's uncle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, are you on the same
Class.
grade?
Yeah. Lead Peter School in here.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
But the audition, yeah. Audition for exactly yours. Good for music, yeah. Take the mic, so I want to see. Miss Zhao did teach me to just, are we gonna, I'm gonna, yeah?
I can't exactly do that. It's a bit difficult.
Now, can we get a picture with you and your counselor here, Peter
Yes.
Clark? Come on up over here and we'll do it. You get in the middle and Peter will get on one side. So are you singing as well? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Mesdames et messieurs, on va commencer.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will begin the February 13th meeting
Of Ottawa City Council, agenda number 49. For those of you who are able to, please stand for prayer and remain standing for the singing of our national anthem. Almighty God, let us work together to serve all our people. Dieu Tout-Puissant, aidez-nous à travailler ensemble afin de bien servir nos citoyens. It's now my pleasure to ask Councillor Clark to introduce our special guests who will sing O Canada. Councillor.
Well, today we're going to hear the national anthem by two students from Ashbury, Julia Davis on vocal and Michael Henley on piano. Julie Davis is a grade 12 student, classically trained, spent time over the summer training in New York City with some of the best on Broadway. So we're looking at a star just waiting to be recognized. After another training session in New York this summer, she hopes to start the theater program at University of Toronto in September, as long as she doesn't plan to become a Maple Leaf fan. Julia has participated in musicals at Ashbury, landing lead roles since grade 9. In Grease, The Drowsy Chaperone, and Anything Goes. All very, very popular musicals. And this year she'll perform her final role at Ashbury as Fanny Bryce in this year's production of Funny Girl. Michael Henley is currently in grade 11, and he's also participated in the musical production of Drowsy Chaperone, Anything Goes, and Funny Girl. He studies with jazz pianist Mark Ferguson and trumpet player Craig Peterson, and has had the opportunity to perform with Canadian Scott Thompson as part of the Chamber Elements, a site-specific musical composition for the National Gallery of Canada. He's currently working on his audition requirements for university admissions as he goes for his bachelor's in music next year. Please welcome Julie and Michael.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Well, that was terrific. Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Clark, for suggesting those two talented students from Ashbury College in Rockcliffe. It's now my opportunity and our opportunity as council and as a city to recognize two individuals, first with the Mayor's City Builder Award, and I'd ask Sarah Daler to come forward and her city councillor, Councillor Wilkinson, as we present this council meeting's Mayor's City Builder Award. Welcome, Sarah, and I know your family members are here with you as well. Ms. Daler is the Vice President of the Morgans Grant and Briarbrook Community Association, and through the association she is involved with many projects in the community with a particular emphasis on environmental initiatives. En tant que vice-président de cette association,
As the vice chair of this association, she's involved with many projects in the community with a particular interest paid to the environment.
cleaning up the capital and providing environmental education to residents at picnics and community events throughout Canada. One important project Ms. Daler has been an integral part of is the design and developments of the gardens at l'École élémentaire publique Canada. She brought together the volunteers, raised the money, wrote the grant application, and found sponsors where they were needed. C'est elle qui a rassemblé.
She brought together the volunteers, raised the money, wrote the grant application, and found sponsors where they were needed.
And I understand that the school and the community are extremely grateful for all that she has done to see this project to fruition. Ms. Daler has worked hard to make our city greener and help people get into better environmental habits and help events leave a lighter footprint on the planet. Madame Daler a fait de gros efforts pour rendre notre ville plus écologique.
She worked hard to make our city greener, to help people get greener.
Which is one of the biggest community celebrations throughout our city. Through Ms. Daler's hard work, the event has achieved a greater than 50% waste diversion rate, which is tremendous, decreased its carbon emissions, and helped to raise environmental awareness throughout the community. It's important work that Ms. Daler continues to do in our city on behalf of our city, and I want to thank you for the wonderful work and role model that you've become as an environmentalist in Canada and throughout the city. It's my pleasure that you can to present this award with Councillor Wilkinson and to thank you for doing such an important job in our community. Keep up the good work. Congratulations.
I'm extremely honored and humbled to be a recipient of the City Builder Award. Thank you so much, Mayor Watson. I'd like to thank, in addition to Mayor Watson, the Ottawa City Council and my councillor, Marion Wilkinson, for this honor. You all serve as models for all of the citizens of the city with your dedication to public service, perseverance, and commitment to seeing your visions for a better city of Ottawa as they become reality. I would also like to thank my wonderful family, my husband, Mark Daler, and our children, Elizabeth and Nicholas Daler, for their love and support. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge that my standing here today as a recipient of this award represents the involvement of so many other individuals building this city, the long-standing members of the Briarbrook and Morgan's Grant Community Association executive team, the volunteers who maintain our community skating rinks, the parents who give their time coaching sports teams, community members planting trees, removing graffiti, and cleaning up our streets. To les parents bénévoles et
all the volunteers and the schools at the elementary school in Canada.
Planning committee of one of the city's best community-wide celebrations, as you said, Mayor Watson, Canada Day in Canada. And the members of the Ottawa Chamber of Commerce Environment Committee, who contribute their business acumen and passion for environmental sustainability and business prosperity to continue to drive the economic engine of our city. And to the countless community members involved in a wide variety of sustainability-related projects across the city, I'm honored and humbled to accept this award, really, on all of your behalf. So thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you to members of your family who are here to celebrate. At this time, I'd like to invite Rob Lachambre to join me for a special presentation. Rob, City Councillor, is Councillor Blais, who, as you know, is ill and not with us, but perhaps Councillor Monette can represent Councillor Blais at this celebration. Rob, welcome, and members of your family are here as well, and we thank them for taking time out of their schedule to be with us. On July 21st, 2011, Mr. Lachambre was driving just south of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, where he's visiting his hometown, when on the highway a car ahead of them flipped into a ditch. Le 21 juillet 2011,
On July 21st, 2011, Mr. Lachambre was driving just south of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, where he was visiting his hometown, when on the highway ahead, a car flipped into the ditch.
and upside down, submerged underwater. Mr. Lachambre was able to remove the man from the...
Monsieur Lachambre a pu extraire la personne de la voiture et quand celle-ci a repris conscience, elle l'a remercié chaleureusement pour le remercier. Et s'il n'avait pas eu autant de courage, il n'aurait pas pu extraire le passager et il n'aurait pas survécu. Monsieur Lachambre, au nom du gouverneur général du Canada, son Excellence très honorable David Johnson, j'ai le plaisir de vous présenter le certificat de mention élogieuse du gouverneur général pour acte de courage. Comme je le disais, j'imagine ce que vous avez pu penser quand vous avez assisté à cet accident, mais c'est grâce à votre action que vous avez sauvé la vie d'une personne. Je vous félicite.
Thank you very much. Just a couple quick thank yous. Thank you to my parents for crawling down into the ditch with me. Thank you to my kids for staying in the van and doing what they were told and not freaking out. Thank you to my wife for calling 911, which may seem like a simple task, although if anyone here has been driving in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan, and you're an Ontario girl trying to explain to someone where you are, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Thank you to my sister for nominating me for this, and thank you to the Governor General and Mr. Watson for presenting me with this. Thank you.
Before we get to roll call, I have some very good news to inform members of Council. I'm pleased to notify Council that the City of Ottawa finalized its project agreement with the Rideau Transit Group for the Confederation Line. This is a very historic moment for our Council, and this successfully concludes the Infrastructure Ontario-led procurement period and launches the construction of both the Confederation Line and Highway 417 widening project. Ainsi, s'y termine l'étape d'approvisionnement dirigé.
This finalizes the project led by Ontario and the completion of the Confederation Line.
Posting online and will be available to the public next week to coincide with a ceremonial signing event between the City and RTG. An invitation will go out to members of Council in the coming days for this event, and I want to take this opportunity to thank our staff under the leadership of City Manager Kent Kirkpatrick, Deputy City Manager Nancy Sheppers, and Rail Implementation Office Director John Jensen for their expert work on this major project. I also want to thank our federal and provincial partners, including Infrastructure Ontario, as well as our partners in the Rideau Transit Group. This document was ratified late yesterday, and we met obviously the deadline of having it signed before February 14th, and I wanted to bring this news to the attention of Council and the public as we take the next step towards this city building initiative that is really going to help transform our city and modernize our transit system. So congratulations to all, and we look forward to the formal signing ceremony next week and construction beginning in the next month or so. Merci. Roll call, Madam Deputy Clerk, please.
Conseiller Manette.
Present.
Councillor Blois.
Here.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Present.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Caudry,
Present.
Councillor Taylor,
Here.
Councillor Shirelli,
Here.
Councillor Egli,
Here.
Councillor Deans,
Here.
Councillor Tierney,
Présent.
Conseiller Fleury,
Si.
Councillor Clark,
Present.
Councillor Holmes, Councillor Hobbs, Councillor McCrae,
Here.
Councillor Chernushenko,
Présent.
Councillor Hume, Councillor Blais, Councillor Thompson,
Présent.
Councillor Moffat,
Here.
Conseiller DeRoche, Councillor Hughley,
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Here.
Le quorum est 10, Monsieur le Maire.
Merci. A confirmation of minutes from January 23rd, 2013. Carried. Declarations of interest, including those originally from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêts, y compris ceux découlant de réunions antérieures. Received none. Communications as presented. Regrets from Councillors Blais, Hobbs, and Holmes. They've advised that they will be absent from the council meeting of February 13th, 2013. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation des rapports. Conseil Monette and Shirelli.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Motion.
Thank you. So the motion by Mr. Monette, seconded by Chiarelli, the report number 28, the Finance and Economic Development Committee report and the Transportation Committee, that they are examined and that the rules of procedures be suspended to receive and consider the Planning Committee report, the Selection Panel Accessibility Advisory Committee entitled Appointment, Accessibility Advisory Committee, the report from the Selection Panel, Arts, Culture, Heritage, and Recreation Advisory Committee entitled Appointments, Arts, Culture, Heritage, and Recreation Advisory Committee, the report from the Selection Panel, Built Heritage Subcommittee entitled Appointments, Built Heritage Subcommittee, the report from the Selection Panel, Community Services Advisory Committee entitled Appointments, Community Services Advisory Committee, the report from the Selection Panel, Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee entitled Appointments, Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee, the report from the Selection Panel, French Language Services Advisory Committee entitled Appointments, French Language Services Advisory Committee, and because of the urgency of the items contained in the report, and that the rules of procedure be suspended to receive and consider Planning Committee Report 44 because of the urgency of the item contained in the report. Specified reason set out below. Waiver of the rules is being requested for item 13 of the City Council agenda, so that parks projects can be undertaken this construction season.
Adopté. Item number 1, Selection Panel Accessibility Advisory Committee, Jury de sélection comité consultatif sur la
The report from the Selection Panel Accessibility Advisory Committee. Is it carried?
Item number 2, Appointment Recreation Advisory Committee, as presented. Carried. Item 3, Appointments Build Heritage Subcommittee, Nomination Sous-Comité de Patrimoine Bâti. Carried.
Oh, I wish to record my dissent.
Dissent by Councillor Clark. Okay. On the report, carried. Item 4, Appointments Community Services Advisory Committee, Nomination Comité Consultatif sur les Services Communautaires. Councillor Taylor has an amendment on a technical error on this. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Mr.
Seconded
Mayor.
by Councillor Caudry.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Caudry, whereas there was a clerical error in the final order of the names being recommended for appointment to the Community Services Advisory Committee. Therefore, be it resolved that Council approve the appointments with the following amendments: that George Besner be appointed as a voting member, that Joanna Hove be appointed as reserve number 1, and Stuart Sykes be appointed as reserve number 2.
On the amendment by Councillors Taylor and Caudry, carried. On the main report as amended? Carried. Selection Panel, Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee, Juré de sélection Comité consultatif sur la gérance environnementale, appointments as recommended. Carried. Item number 6, nomination Comité consultatif sur les services en français, French Language Services Advisory Committee, report as recommended. Carried. Adopté. Committee reports, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 28, rapport numéro 28 du Comité de l'Agriculture et des Affaires Rurales. Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor El Shantiri, has a technical amendment. Councillor Thompson, if you'd like to introduce this, please.
Yes, I would, Mr. Mayor. And it is on the screen. There are 5 technical amendments. I don't believe that I have to read those, but this is supported by city staff and moved by myself and seconded by Councillor El Shantiri.
Okay, and staff, I understand, are supportive of this. Mr. O'Connor has indicated. On the amendment by Councillors Thompson and El Shantiri, carried. On the report as amended, Villages Zoning, Zonage des Villages, adopté, carried. Merci. Item number 8, proposed Parks Canada canal fees resolution, les frais pour le canal rideau proposé par Parks Canada. To let members of council be aware, I spoke yesterday to Minister Peter Kent. We had a very good discussion, and he is more than willing to meet with the mayors from the Rideau community, the corridor, and I know Councillor Thompson has been our council lead on this committee. And he respects the fact that we have a motion before us, but has wanted me to convey to members of council that he's more than willing to meet. We'll take him up on that offer, and I think I had a discussion with one MP as well yesterday, and certainly Mayor Struthers from Merrickville has been quite vocal on this, and we'll continue to work with him and the other mayors. So I just wanted to let you know that certainly the federal government is amenable to meeting, and I indicated that we would be prepared to host the meeting here. Councillor El Shantiri.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to, at this point, to our record show our appreciation to Councillor Thompson for working very well with our colleague, other mayors and other municipalities to bring a common ground solution to this issue. So thank you to Councillor Thompson.
Great. Councillor, would you like to add anything to the motion, as both you're the rep and the chair of ARAC?
No, I appreciate your discussions with the minister, and I spoke with Mayor Struthers this morning. He's very pleased that you've done that and that you would be willing to host a meeting at City Hall. So thank you.
Okay. On the motion as presented, carried. Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 28A, rapport numéro 28A du Comité des finances et de développement économique. Number 9, Brownfields Property Tax Assistance, Rehabilitation Grant, Development Charge Reduction Program, Green Bank Self-Storage Corporation, 300 Green Bank Road, Green Bank Self-Storage Corporation, 300 Chemin, Green Bank. Carried. Item number 10, Rehabilitation Grant and Development Charge Reduction Program, Sonia by the River, Inc., 350 Montgomery Street. Councillor McCrae has a amendment, seconded by Conseiller Fleury. Councillor McCrae, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fleury. Technical amendment. Therefore, be it resolved that French Recommendation 3 be corrected to accurately reflect wording contained in the English recommendation. Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to read the recommendation. I think it's posted. But it's a technical amendment that doesn't change the substance of the report.
I believe it's a translation issue. It's
Correct.
A number. Yep. Okay, on the amendment presented by Councillor McCrae, Conseiller Fleury.
Adopté.
Adopté.
Merci.
On the main report is amended. Carried. Item number 11, tax rebate for vacant commercial properties, remboursement des taxes pour propriétés commerciales vacantes. I believe Councillor Wilkinson has a motion on this.
It's a technical motion in a way, Mr. Mayor. It's to clarify that it does not apply to business parks and places that are not derelict at all, but it does not change the tone of the motion. So it's resolved that council, to encourage activity with respect to these properties, petition the province to limit access to this rebate to a 3-year period for properties meeting the following criteria. More than 50% of the building is vacant. The property is not in an area with higher than average vacancy. The property is not a single-purpose use property. And the City Property Standards Officer has determined that the property is derelict and does not meet generally accepted property standards. This was prepared by staff, Mr. Mayor, to try to make sure that we don't hinder their business parks, which may have moving vacancies.
Okay, so we believe there's a problem with the names not coming up on the slide, and I know Councillor Clark, I believe Councillor Clark, you don't support this.
Well, I think the problem that I see, and I did ask to be recognized, is that keeping it simple is probably a good way not to get the province confused. I don't know that the property, not a single-purpose use property, changes anything. If it's derelict, it's derelict. And some of the other things are questionable in terms of whether it's friendly amendment or not, so I don't believe it is. I don't have a problem with Clause 4, but the first three would indicate that if the building has got a couple of bins vacant, that's not what we're aiming at. We're aiming at properties that are derelict, not properties that are in use. In other words, if the Bayshore Mall has 3 empty stores, it's not of any issue, and I really don't know what we're trying to get at with these amendments. And apparently somebody indicated I was in favor of these amendments, so I just want to indicate that I'm not.
Mr.
All right, so Mr.
We have staff, they prepared this, so.
Le personnel a préparé quelque chose? Oui, il y a certaines personnes qui ont des commentaires à faire là-dessus. Alors, est-ce qu'on peut revenir sur ce point-là? D'accord, c'est ce que je me propose de faire. Nous allons terminer lors du jour convenu et nous reviendrons là-dessus quand M. Hughes pourra alors répondre à des questions. Je sais que la conseillère Wilkinson veut faire quelque chose à ce sujet. On va tâcher de trouver une solution. 12. L'examen de mi-mandat sur la gouvernance de 2010-2014. Je pense que nous avons une motion du conseiller Taylor. Si vous voulez présenter cette motion, conseiller. Elle est appuyée par le conseiller Moffett. Merci, Monsieur le maire. Je propose, et appuyé par le conseiller Moffett, attendu que le 6 décembre 2006, le conseil municipal a approuvé une disposition de non-retrait et attendu que certains membres du conseil ont indiqué qu'ils voulaient peut-être augmenter leur augmentation du coût de la vie.
To the city clerk and solicitor.
Okay, so we have, I think there are a number of people that have questions on that, so we'll come back, we'll hold that one as well. And we'll go to item number 13, capital planning for parks.
Could that be held?
We're coming back, yeah. Yeah, okay, capital planning for parks, staff resources.
Hold 13, please.
Sorry?
Could you hold 13 as well?
Hold that one?
You have some questions.
Madam Deputy Clerk, is there a requirement for a suspension? It was done in the motion to introduce.
Yeah, no, I just have some questions about...
Yeah, no, we'll come back to that. That's fine. Okay, so item 13 is being held as well. Item number 14, Westboro Local Area Parking Study. Carried. Dissent by Councillor Fleury. The bulk consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda? On the bulk consent agenda as presented. Carried. Okay, so we'll go back now to the tax rebate for vacant commercial properties. If Mr. Hughes could come forward. I believe, Councillor Wilkinson, you wanted Mr. Hughes to offer an explanation on the motion. So we'll ask Mr. Hughes to come forward. And is the system now operational? So if people would like to ask questions or speak to this item, you can push your button. Mr. Hughes.
The issue with the previous motion that had been raised by Councillor Wilkinson was that some properties that have had extended periods of vacancy could be caught up in the earlier motion. Canada, for example, has experienced a higher than average rate of vacancy since the high-tech crash a number of years ago. And in Canada, we also see a number of single-use properties, for instance, that would have special application to the high-tech industry. These properties don't lend themselves to be rented out to people who are doing any other types of manufacturing. So it's reasonable to expect that those properties would take longer than normal to rent. So these were some of the criteria that we developed to ensure that the motion wouldn't pick up those types of properties. And then finally, the Chief Property Standards Officer is certainly in a position to determine whether or not a property meets generally accepted property standards, and it takes the decision out of the hands of the staff in the finance department in the revenue branch.
Okay, so others to speak or ask questions on this item? No? Okay, so we have an amendment by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor El Shantiri. Carried. On the main motion as amended. Carried. Did you want to dissent, Councillor Clark? No, he's not. Okay. So that's carried. Item number 12, midterm governance review. Questions and comments? Councillor Blois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions on this, and the first one deals with the cost of living increase. And I understand this is, no matter when this is done, this is always a touchy situation, and there's nothing less comfortable than I guess us negotiating with ourselves. There really isn't another party on the other side of the table. But normally the reports that have come back in the past would indicate that increases such as this would be implemented in the following term. Can I understand the rationale why you're recommending it for midterm here? And I know you have a midterm governance review, but normally even midterm, it's put off till the following term.
Mr. Mayor, part of the rationale was the rationale and overlying guiding principles that we used with regards to this entire report, which included transparency, accountability, and consistency. And when we began to look at the issues surrounding the original task force on council remuneration, and I will say to this council what I said to committee, I was the staff liaison for the purposes of that particular external report. It failed on a number of those errors, particularly with regards to the complex formula for setting the mayor and councillor salaries. Similarly, with the consistency issue, it was the fact that councils, and I am saying clearly over the last couple of terms, have not actually applied this formula. They've done other things, ad hoc measures, usually sometime after the budget. So what we were looking for was to be transparent and accountable to the public and provide a consistent and clear formula for the change.
I guess my perspective would be that accountability and transparency is achieved by making this effective the first day of a new term. And that way the voters then get to probably have pass the best judgment on the transparency of it. Not sure if there's a will around the table to move that or to second that. I would be prepared to move it. My other question is...
Councillor Blois, I think the Deputy Clerk has a comment. That,
sorry. Okay. Mike for the Deputy Clerk, please. I'm with you.
This is...
Now you know how we feel.
And again, just to add to what the clerk said, when Council adopted the Citizens Task Force on Remuneration when Council adopted the Citizens Task Force on Remuneration recommendations, one of the recommendations was, in fact, that members vote on their salaries at the first meeting in the new term. We didn't do that this term because Council already had an existing salary freeze. The salary freeze came out and we were obliged to actually come back to deal with this matter.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question deals with number 28, the temporary FTE to support the deputy mayors. And I don't doubt in the least that this is something that maybe, that the workload may be such that it requires this. But I see this not being I don't see it in the proper context, in the sense that a number of years ago we approved half an FTE per committee. And certainly the committee workload has changed. The committee meetings are less frequent, and I would have thought the proper approach here is to do these all together, because I think there needs to be an evaluation of the committee workload. And other than planning, where I can see certainly the workload is there, we've actually divided into more committees over the years, and they meet less frequently. And not linking these two together is like a piecemeal approach, and this is the incremental way that we increase FTEs in our budget. Every year, there's a couple that slip in here and there, and by the time we try to rein it in, it's too late. Why would we not have taken a more fulsome approach here?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'll defer to the deputy in a moment if she has anything further to add, but the way that staff are looking at this from my office was this was an appropriate matter for midterm based on what we thought was the volume of work, quite frankly, coming out of our office. But we would also take it as a direction, Mr. Mayor, because various members have raised this and the councillor has raised it, that we would look at a fulsome review of all of these positions in the final governance for the next term, because then we would have a full term of comparison with regards to previous terms and the changes in the council and committee format.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark, please. Peter, can you put your mic there?
Thank you. Well, you know, at the beginning of this term, when the salaries were frozen, I wasn't asked, and nobody objected. And these were, by the way, passed by the previous council for the following term, the very thing that Councillor Blois is suggesting, to take it out of the hands of the people that are immediately implicated. Here we are, we're not asked again. It shows up and buried in a report, Clause 29, and we weren't asked again. And now we're getting people to say, well, I'm opting out. Well, I don't know about chest beating on the favor of opting out or not opting out, but the fact is that, you know, we've been rather collaborative through this council. I believe that the saying of the family that prays together stays together. I believe that everybody should be in or everybody should be out. Yes, that's what I believe, Mr. Mayor. I have as well, if it's decided that we are going to reinstitute the previous council's recommendation for cost of living increases, that I will donate the proceeds, which in my case come to net $890 a year, to a particular charity that houses 18 micro-charities. It's an amazing operation that you should look into, because, you know, we talk about incubating businesses and we put them in an incubator where they have shared services and shared communications and those kind of things. This is a well-established model in the business community. It's not a well-established model in the charitable community. So I look at the Heartwood House as an experiment that may branch out and expand into providing joint services for a number of charities. So if you decide that I have to take this $890 net, I will keep it for about 5 minutes. I have Maureen Maloney here to accept my check so that you know I mean it.
All right, thank you. Conseiller Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. I have a question. It's under section, it's part 2, other governance-related matters, item 11, the status report on the compliance of city agencies, boards, commissioners with respect to the Municipal Act 2001 policy requirements. I'm wondering what is the city, it appears in some of the attached documents that some of the agencies, a large number of agencies are still not compliant. So I'm wondering what we are doing to make sure that they do become compliant.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, with regards to the question, the Municipal Act mandates that there are at least 4 different policies that all of our local boards, and the clear definition of that, which includes business improvement areas and other local boards for the city, must be compliant with. And Council has the overall governance responsibilities for its local boards. In that matter, we have, on 2 different occasions over the last couple of years, shared with some of these boards and commissions our template documents for things like procedure bylaw and hiring policies and those sorts of things to ensure that they are compliant. We are monitoring them, as the report indicates, and the new step that we're going to do, in particular with our BIAs, is work with economic development and go BIA and ensure that they have all of the orientation and information they require. We are looking at, Mr. Mayor, 100% compliance for the next round of governance in 2 years.
Thank you.
Merci, Conseiller. Councillor Shirelli, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, dealing with the motion from Councillor Taylor and the comments from dealing with the motion from Councillor Taylor and the comments from Councillor Blois earlier, it is a solid principle to have the outgoing council set remuneration for the incoming council, and that's exactly what this does, because the outgoing council last time said you shall have a 2-year pay freeze, and then you return to a modified version of the formula from that the city clerk described. When we looked at the commitments from various members when they ran during the last election, the majority of members supported the 2-year wage freeze and did not support a wage freeze beyond the 2 years. So the implication is that the directive or the message sent by the previous council to the candidates in the last election and to the electorate at the last election was that there would be a 2-year pay freeze followed by a modified version of the formula that was adopted under Mayor O'Brien's motion in the previous term. This one, the recommendation from the governance report, basically enacts that directive from the previous council, only it does give the new council slightly less of an increase than they might otherwise have expected when they were seeking office at the last election. So if you're a fan of having the outgoing council set the pay for the incoming council, then the staff recommendation in the report is the route that best gives effect to that. So I think that's the first thing we should look at, and I think all members of council should support it, not for their own personal situation necessarily, but you're setting remuneration for the office and for people who will come in to run as candidates next time, and they need to know what to expect in terms of predictability, in terms of certainty and commitment to our economic development issues. On the issue of the scheduler, it's not a $75,000 job. Let's begin with that. That's an exaggeration. Secondly, when you look at the amount of, or the number of events that the mayor attends every year, if it's anywhere between 1,200 and 1,700, and you relate that to the average work year at the city, the work year at the city is 1,820 hours. That means the event attendance by the mayor and deputy mayors is a full year's work for a person. It's a full-time job just on its own. And with triple or quadruple that number coming in terms of requests, and when the mayor doesn't attend, or a deputy mayor can't attend, then the greetings that have to be sent, or recognition that has to be sent, all that other work is clearly too much for one person. And just by virtue of the fact that if you have 1,800 events between the three of them, that's at an hour each is a full-time job. And that's just to attend them and to prepare people for attending, then prepare documentation for people attending, coordinate the schedule, and then on top of that, ensure that those who unfortunately can't have any of the three attend, that they do get the recognition or the acknowledgement or souvenirs in some cases, whatever it is that's needed. That is clearly more work than you're going to get out of one person. It's just not possible. I think it's just a recognition of the number of events that this has grown into.
Thanks, Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Hubley, please. Questions and comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question on this opting out motion is, my fear with it is that it creates different pay levels for around the city, because we're talking about the position, not the people in the position. So I'd like to get a better understanding of what we're voting on here. If this goes through and someone chooses to opt out, could the clerk tell us that, like, will they have to set a period? Like, will they be opting out for the full term? When they come back in, do they come back in at whatever the salary level is at that point? Or, for example, if it's $92,400 now, when they come back in, do they just go up 1.9% from 92 at that point?
Mr. Mayor, the way the resolution clause excuse me, is phrased is that they would have, quite frankly, no time limit on when they could opt out. Previously, when Council had a similar motion, it was 5 business days, so there was a great deal of scrutiny involved in that. But here it says that they will be able to opt out salary arrangements by indicating their preference in writing with the city clerk. It is my understanding, Mr. Mayor, that if they are opting out, they would remain at the current salary. I'm not aware that there's any intention in the motion to make it a 50% opt-out or any other deviation of the same. With regards to what would go forward in the future, again, one would presume that if there are new councillors coming on in the next term in 2014, then they would begin at the base salary for all members of council.
So, if I understood that correctly, you're opting out for the term, and if you get reelected or whoever replaces you, they come back in at whatever that salary level is at that time.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, subject to being further clarity from the mover and seconder, that is my understanding.
Okay. Okay, and another issue as part of this report, the item number 10, where it says that staff be directed to undertake a review of the Pineview golf course relationship with the city. Do we have any timeline for that report coming back, Mr. Mayor?
Well, my preference would be the sooner the better. As you know, we have to negotiate with the NCC who own the land, and we have to get their permission if we're going to go and do, for instance, an RFP. But my preference would be to get it underway within the next couple of months.
Would it be considered a friendly amendment to put a timeline on this item number 10 and suggest that the report come back, say, by the end of June or the 1st of September or whatever?
Yeah, no, I'm certainly open to that, and I think staff would have no problem with that. It would certainly give us a goal to meet, so I would entertain that if you'd like to write it out.
Okay, thank you. Does staff want to comment on that or give some guidance?
We're fine with that, Mr. Mayor.
You're fine? Okay, I'll write something up on that.
Maybe check with Mr. Kanalakis on an appropriate time, and by the time we get back to you, you'll have the motion, and if you'd like me to second it, that's fine.
We'll
do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And with respect to the motion that I put forward, I wanted to just simply make a few basic points. First of all, is that I have certainly a very personal understanding that every single one of the members of council work very hard. So that's not in debate at all. What I'm attempting to do with this motion is simply establish the opportunity for personal choice. What I'm simply trying to do is establish the opportunity for personal choice. And that would be consistent with the understanding of my residents when I committed during an election campaign not to take a car allowance. There was an implied understanding that I wouldn't take any additional monies throughout the course of this term. So I'm trying to keep true to the spirit of that commitment. That doesn't mean that I don't think that folks around this table aren't worth every dime that they're paid, because I do. At the same time as I opted out of the car allowance in the election campaign, there was an understanding on behalf of my residents that I wouldn't take any additional monies, and so I'm simply trying to keep true to that purpose or to that commitment, and allow other members of council who might have made the same commitments or similar ones to exercise that as well. And with respect to the the notion of the position versus the person receiving the pay. My comment on that would be, it wasn't a position that made the commitment. It was a person. I wasn't the office of anything when I was a candidate, when I made that commitment. Therefore, it shouldn't be incumbent upon my office to pay for that commitment. It should be incumbent upon me to pay for it. So by virtue of this motion, I'm simply trying to allow us the flexibility to exercise our own personal choice when it comes to matters of finance. Thank you.
Okay. We seem to be having some trouble hearing people because there's a lot of side conversations, so I'd ask if you're going to speak, it's being picked up by the microphones, if you could do that outside of the range of the microphones. Thank you. Councillor Chernyshenko, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Perhaps a wiser man than I would have just stayed out of this debate, but here we are. I think this council has been very good at not playing political games, and I can't think of other words than saying posturing between one another. Look at me, I'm doing this, you're doing that. And I believe this is a moment where we need to stay consistent as a group and take a vote. I believe that what we are being asked to do here is we're being asked to vote on the right thing. Past councils, because we're in this ridiculous situation of having to vote on our own salaries in front of the public, past councils all over the world will always find it more politically convenient to say, we'll put that off, we'll delay it, we'll take a freeze. This is a job that's a very tough job, and not a lot of people want to take it on. We're not overpaid for the work, but we're well paid. To take anything other than a cost of living allowance increase would actually mean we're taking a decrease every year. We're getting less money each year than when we started. I believe it is the right thing that we vote now, effective in this year, to establish a cost of living allowance rate, establish the salary, and get it out of the political arena. It's done. It's now. We know our salary, and anyone running will know what they're getting, and once and for all, we put it off the table. We have that chance now. As regards to Councillor Taylor's motion, I understand where it's coming from. Some councillors made commitments, but I think once we start establishing different levels, different categories, we start falling into that, or different levels again. I would suggest that for those who have made those sorts of commitments, you still have the opportunity to make your charitable donation. You can choose to do it quietly because you think it's the right thing to do. You can choose to do it publicly because you made a commitment and you need to show your voters that you followed through on it. But I don't think that we should be setting up a separate category here where we can opt in and opt out, or else we will all be dragged down to the race to the bottom. I didn't take this, I didn't take that, I'm giving that back. I don't think we need to do that. We're professionals, and we can do this in a professional way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. So we have Councillor Taylor's motion, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Yeas and nays have been called.
Councillor DeRoche?
Oui.
Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
Councillor El-Shantiri?
No.
Councillor Holmes? Councillor Shirelli?
No.
Conseiller Manette?
No.
Councillor Hobbs? Councillor Tierney?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley?
No.
Councillor Harder? No. Councillor Wilkinson?
No.
Councillor McCrae?
No.
Councillor Clark?
No.
Councillor Eglai?
No.
Councillor Caudry?
No.
Conseiller Blais? Councillor Deans?
Yes.
Councillor Blois?
No.
Conseiller Fleury?
No.
Councillor Hume?
No.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
No.
Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Mayor Watson?
Yes.
6 yeas, 15 nays.
Okay. I have a motion seconded by Councillor DeRoche that the mayor's salary be frozen at its current level for the duration of this term of council. Carried. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So on the report as amended. Carried. All right. Next we have capital. Sorry, Councillor Hubley, did you have that motion on Pine View ready?
What we just worked out is we're going to do it as direction to staff.
Okay. So maybe at the end of the meeting.
It's in the works.
Okay. Okay, Planning Committee Report number 44, Capital Planning for Parks, Staff Resources. Councillor Eglai, I believe, had a question. This is
yes.
item 13.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions. I'll just wait till staff come to the table.
While we're waiting, Deputy Clerk, I just wanted to thank our Deputy Clerk because the midterm governance is a large undertaking, and I think they did a very good job along with our City Clerk, and I neglected to thank them for their hard work. So, Councillor Eglai, you have a question to staff, I believe?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I apologize, I wasn't able to get to planning yesterday because of another commitment, because this is an issue of concern in my ward. So you may have covered this yesterday, Mr. Chenier, but my understanding was in December you were directed to go off and look at alternatives to the December 7th report and come back with those at the meeting in February of the Planning Committee. From what I can see on paper anyway, we have exactly the same report, no alternatives or options. So did I miss something by way of a verbal presentation yesterday that put other things on the table?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at Planning Committee yesterday, we were asked about the work that we had done as per Planning Committee's direction to go look specifically at vacant positions across the corporation and any possible opportunity to match vacant FTEs and available funds behind those FTEs to this project. We worked with the City Treasurer to look at this corporately and reported back to the committee yesterday that, in fact, we had not found suitable funding to offset the cost of these two planners.
So is your proposal that's put before us today to make this a permanent policy and 2 permanent positions, or is this to hold us till next budget year?
The intent would be that these positions would be sustained for as long as there is demand through the capital budget, through the cash in lieu coming forward, which from where we sit now looks like it's going to be at least for a few years going forward. We certainly have enough projects in the queue for 2013 and well into 2014.
So this isn't a stopgap measure. This is essentially a change in policy as to how the CIL money is spent.
This policy would reflect the similar approach that was discussed at committee yesterday to fund growth from growth and to take off a percentage to accommodate the actual work that's required to get these projects going.
I understand, but that's not how we spend the money now. You need our approval or consent to go forward and make that change in how the money's spent, correct?
Correct.
You talked about the amount of work. And in the report you indicate there's enough work there to keep 2 planners busy, as I understand it. Can you quantify in dollars how much work we're looking at in 2013? By that I mean the total cost of the project.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can't quantify in dollars because not all projects have been completely costed out yet. Some of them are in the process of doing that. I can tell you that we have 70 projects on the table at this point. 23 of those are cash in lieu projects, but not all of them have been costed. They range from small projects in the few $1,000s to the $300,000 range.
But the smaller projects won't be funded by this change, as I understand it, correct?
Correct. The change, the 10% levy, would only be on projects over $100,000.
I guess where I'm going with this, Mr. Chenier, is in 2013, are you going to have enough of those projects in excess of $100,000 to, will you get to the $2.2 million you need, or are you going to exceed the $2.2 million in terms of the projects? And I'm not going to pin you down to an exact cent, but you must have an idea whether we're talking $2 million in that type of projects or $4 million in that type of projects.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, because of the unique situation that we're in of just taking this approach now, recommendation 2 of the report recommends that for 2013 and for the projects that are in stream now, that the funding be derived from the citywide cash in lieu reserve, and that in fact the projects that are on the books now not be hit with the 10% levy. It's every project from here on in which will help offset the cost of maintaining this in the future. But for 2013, recommendation 2 addresses that, so that we do in fact have enough money.
Okay, but do you have too much money is what I'm getting at. In other words, is if you generate more than $2.2 million, where's the balance of those funds going to go that should be used to build splash pads or playstations or whatever they are?
The intent would only be to draw money to the $220,000 that we require to maintain 2 positions. We would not be drawing more than what is required.
So if you've reached a 220 and I come forward with a project worth $150,000, you're not going to add $15,000 to that? And if you are going to add 15, where does that money go?
We haven't worked out in future years whether we would look at setting up some capacity to increase beyond the 2, and that may be justified at this point. But for the immediate, we would look at capturing the 220 and then stopping and leaving the money for community projects.
Okay, I'm a little confused then. So if I happen to be the councillor with the project that goes above the $2.2 million, I essentially get that without any additional fee, but my colleague who put theirs in just before me has to pay the 10%?
We would have to work out a process so that that doesn't happen and that there is equity amongst projects. We haven't worked out the mechanism by which we would draw those funds with Mr. Moser or with the treasurer, but I think our intent would be that all projects would share in the costs and that those costs be capped at what's required.
Okay. Let me try this a different way. In a given year, on average, how much do we spend on this type of project?
In a given year, we're probably, you're talking just cash in lieu projects?
Well, yeah, because that's where the money's coming from, right? The cash in lieu project.
Yes.
So
it's probably in the $2 to $3 million range, depending on the year and the wards and whether they're ready to move forward with their projects.
So you could have a surplus, if it's $3 million, you could have a surplus of $70,000.
Potentially.
But you're not sure what to do with that at this point.
Our intent would be to work out a mechanism so that we didn't front load too much money into the department to cover this, and that we only draw what is required. The specific mechanism to do that and the timing on how we drew that money from individual ward accounts is still something that we have to work out.
Okay, and just one question, sort of put all this in perspective. What would an average splash pad cost me to put into a park?
Approximately $220,000.
And then an additional $22,000 on top of that.
That's right. The extra percentage would be put over that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion from Councillor Shirelli and Hubley. Be it resolved that the recommendation be amended to change the funding source to citywide contingency. Councillor Shirelli, would you like to introduce this motion? This is basically what I believe was attempted at the committee.
Yeah.
That was rejected.
Thanks for the editorial. Sorry, Your Worship, we have over 17,000 employees in the corporation of one form or another, and we have a priority that on the operational side that is coming from the public and not being handled particularly well by council. We went through this debate for 3 hours at budget time. It was the only item where we actually debated a change in the operational budget. So I think when council detects a need to get caught up on these types of things and a need to give effect to what the community wants on these types of things, we need to move on it. Secondly, putting it in contingency instead of, according to the current recommendation, even recognizing that these projects are funded in the way they are, and with the split they are, with up to 80% the way it is, we need to send a message on this, that this should be something that is an operational priority of the city, that it will be a priority included in the next budget, or at least in the base that gets examined for the next budget, and that will be handled fairly across the city, so that regardless of which part of the city you happen to live in or represent, you're going to get the same sort of recognition and possibility. And finally, with the willingness to create temporary positions in this building, I think it makes sense that if we're going to have one more, or if there's only one more that has been specifically asked for by council, that should be okay when we're trying to give effect to something that is the wish of the public, the demand of the public, and the need of the public. So I think this motion accomplishes that, and urge you to vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Shirley. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm going to ask members of council not to support this motion for a very fundamental reason, because it is not the way we fund the developments of parks in any other part of the city. If you're in a growth community like Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Harder, Councillor Manette, any of the other ones, when you go to plan a park, the park planner is not paid from the general tax base. It's paid from development charges. So those development charges pay for that park planner, which executes that park plan. So the Canada North Recreation Complex, the planner was paid. General tax base? No. Development charges. So what we're doing here is we're setting two sets of standards. One's for those we deal with CIL funds, and one where we deal with parks in development charges. And fundamentally, I don't think that that's right. I think that what we need to be doing is, as closely as possible, saying we're going to treat parks in growth communities where the amounts of monies that are collected from development charges pay for those park planners. We're going to do the same thing for CIL funds. So when you have, but we can't make them absolutely equal because of the legislation and other things, but we've done a pretty good job with the report that you see in front of you. So when Councillor Harder goes to build that splash pad in her ward, in her parks, a portion of the development charges goes to pay for the park planner to plan that. And I don't think that should be any different than in Councillor Eglei's ward or in my ward, quite frankly. So I think we need to treat all of the development of splash pads, whether they're in Councillor Harder's ward, Councillor Eglei's, or my ward, exactly the same. And I think that we've established the principle on how we fund these park planners. In the case, we've done it very principally with development charges. And we've said, okay, development charges will pay for the development of that splash pad, not the general tax base. And I think we just have to extend that principle to CIL funds. And I know that's hard because councillors see these CIL funds as very personal amounts of money. And so they see every nickel that goes out that's not going into the ground as a lost opportunity. Well, I would argue that those people in those growth communities who see that development charge money shrinking and going to pay for park planners feel exactly the same way. yet as a matter of principle they've not adopted the position that the general tax base should pay for park planning in their community. And they've accepted that development charges should pay for those park planners as we develop the recreation complexes and the parks and the splash pads in those areas. So what I'm saying to members of council is that what you have before you from Planning Committee is the most principled approach to take when applying these CIL funds. I think that this is, I understand why they're doing it, but I think it's the wrong approach to take. Because if I was in a developing community, I would be coming back to you now and saying, okay, if that's the way you want to treat park planning, do the same, give the same benefit to my residents, who now I'm going to get that $22,000 or whatever the money is, and I'm going to be able to apply it to make my park just that much better, because I don't have that privilege today. And, you know, so I'm not sure, and I don't believe you can treat the two situations differently, and I believe Planning Committee has done a good job in treating all of our residents who see park development in their community fairly and equitably. It's not an exact, but it's fair and it's equitable, whether you're in a developing community or an existing community like my own. So I would say that we should defeat the Chiarelli motion and adopt the Planning Committee recommendations.
All right, thank you. Councillor Blois.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, ditto on the double standard. We voted this motion down resoundingly yesterday at Planning Committee and should do the same again for all the reasons that were just stated. Thank you.
Well said.
Okay. Short and sweet. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was kind of fortunate not to be at Planning Committee and listening to that debate yesterday, but I've heard it today, and it strikes me that we have a way of taking funds that were we'll call it the ward funds for cash in lieu of parkland and getting some work done. And that's what I liked about the motion that was there before this amendment. I think contingency funds are there for exactly that, contingencies, and I don't see this as being contingency. We know already we're overwhelmed in the amount of projects we have relative to the amount of people we have to action them, and I think that adding this will free up some other resources for those so-called have-not areas. Poverty, the guy that cried poverty to me is credible. He really is. We'll have to find a way that he can get his projects done too, because that's what we're all about in here. We're all about getting these projects off the ground running and getting our communities with more and better facilities, each and every one of those wards. Probably a good fire station site down there in Ward 9 that we could use for recreation. That was because he brought it up earlier. No, I do believe that Planning Committee made a prudent decision. I do not believe that going into the so-called contingencies or year-end adjustments is the place to go with these things.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chiarelli, I believe you've already spoken on this item.
Yeah, wrap up though.
But there's another person that wants to speak, okay, Councillor Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I really didn't want to speak on this because, but sometimes, I don't speak often, but when I do, it's because I'm really ticked off. Because I think that collectively around the room, and I listened to what Councillor Chernachenko said in the last debate that we had on the last vote, the last item, and it was about how we succeed by working together. We should never vote for something that does a disservice or disadvantages other people in our city. And yet, if you support the Chiarelli-Hubley motion, that's exactly what you're doing. You see, there's a reason why some of the areas have a lot of CILs and are really excited about spending them. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the fact that in the older areas, when they have an infill into it, they get CILs because they already have parks. And guess what? Even those older parks, we have a life cycle program. And our life cycle program is separate from what we're talking about today. So everybody's in the same pot for that. The rules that apply to the money that comes in through development charges that is over 90% paying for a new Barrhaven Rec Center is from development charges. The reason that we don't have as much money, and I know Councillor Hubley doesn't have really any money in his CILs, cash in lieu, is because they're building new stuff as Canada expands. And in his older parts, Glencairn, for example, they're going to be taken care of. And the money is already set aside through the staffing component that works on life cycle. So if you go ahead and support the Shirelli motion, you're absolutely creating a disadvantage to the majority of people in the city. I'm talking about the people who are all the growth areas, certainly the rural communities where they have smaller growth, but still significant growth. And I don't think that's fair, and I don't think it's reasonable. And there is absolutely no way that I can reconcile the fact that your people should be treated differently just because you want to have faster action. We're all part of the same process. We all take our turns, okay? And yeah, maybe we don't like it then when our project doesn't rise to the top first. But the fact is that this is over $200,000 because we're not willing to take a piece of money of a pot that's not ours, that actually doesn't have our name on, but Mr. Mayor, that we do have the ability to work with our community to decide how to spend it. It may take a bit more time if we choose to do nothing, but the fact is we're going to be doing it the same way that we're waiting for the new parks in Half Moon Bay and in Chapman Mills and in Finley Creek across this city. And we're going to do it the same way, and that is that when we build something new in Centre Point or in Bell's Corners, the same process that applies is the one that's going to apply to everybody in the city. And that's something I think that we can all stand up and defend. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harder. Councillor Tierney, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I think we're sensing a lot of frustration around the table about the fact it seems to be this FTE battle again, and why we're introducing things while we're already moving into another part of the year. This seems to keep popping up. I mean, we went through this discussion before about the number of FTEs, and then surprise, an AG report pops out, and we have all these other FTEs floating around, and this always seems to be our struggle here. So I'm just curious, why was this position not planned for as part of budgeting, the whole budgeting exercise annually?
Mr. Mayor, in the development of the budget, the direction we had from the city manager was that we were not to add FTEs, net FTEs, to this budget, and we did not do that. And so, therefore, the work that how this came up, the work that came up that was on the schedule, and how this came up was how was this work going to get done without FTEs, because the current park planners are basically overtaxed in terms of the work they already have done. So the origination of this was that we need some resources to get this other work done, this $2-3 million work done. So we did not include any FTEs in any other areas that would grow that complement.
And I respect that, and without prejudice, I'll just say I think we know how the city works when we do annual budgets, and it's just difficult when we don't plan ahead. Were the park planners never overwhelmed before? Was there no indication that maybe this would be a good opportunity to look for what I consider a very valuable FTE?
Well, it's always a balance, Mr. Mayor. The FTEs in park planning, the work comes and goes in terms of peaks and valleys, depending what's happening. They're at a peak now. There's a lot of projects that are underway because we have had a lot of growth in the city. But did we specifically add positions to this particular area in anticipation of the cash in lieu? No, we took it according to how we've done it in the past, where we try to squeeze that work in with the current complement like we do in many other areas. We absorb the work and we try to get as much work as we do, and usually what gets impacted is not that the work doesn't get done, it's a timeline in which the work gets done because it gets pushed out on that time continuum.
And thank you for that. Now, I guess my message is just a message only is, from a city council perspective, we're expected to try to act as managers and see how everything works, and to have surprises come up like this. I think we have to get out of this mentality. I know there's always new challenges and maybe new positions required, but when it comes to parklands, I think we are well aware that we needed this position. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Deans, please.
It's on? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I raised this at Planning Committee yesterday, fundamentally because the construction season is so short and we need to make a decision. The last thing I wanted to do was drag this out for another month, because that starts cutting into the potential for the projects to be completed during the summer. So whatever funding source we ultimately land on today, I do think that it's really important that Council make a decision and move forward in the interest of trying to get as many projects completed as possible during the summer construction months. We have always funded park planners and FTEs through the budget. It has never been our tradition, to the best of my knowledge, at the City of Ottawa, that we would actually fund these positions by taking play elements out of parks. And that is what we're being asked to do today, to actually take away a water spray sprinkler, to take away a swing, to take away one of those little bouncy things out of the parks in order to fund an FTE to do the work. We have never done that before. It has always been funded through FTEs at the city. And we asked you to go away and take a look if there were other places we could borrow, maybe the planning department or other places we could borrow some planners to get this work done, because, as Mr. Kanalakis correctly said, there's a lot of pressure on park development because there's been a lot of growth. And I do not see this in any way as a competition between the suburbs and the downtown, or one part of the city, the other part of the city. The equal treatment to me is that everybody gets their parks done and the children get as many play facilities as we can afford to give them in those parks, because they're heavily used. And I represented growth areas for a long, long time, and I know that a lot of the parks were actually developed by the developers because they can do it cheaper than we can in many ways. They have their construction equipment and everything else, and we take it when it's complete. So, you know, equal treatment is not how it's done necessarily. It's getting the product at the end, and that every children has the opportunity to play in our parks. So I don't see this as some sort of a tug of war between different parts of the city. I see this fundamentally that if we don't fund FTEs in the traditional way, that it actually just takes away from children in the parks. And that's why I think for this year, I think this should have been done in the budget, frankly. I think we should have properly funded FTEs to do park planning. And I was aware at the time of budget, actually, that we were putting a lot of pressure on our park planners. And we know this year and next year there's going to be so many park developments in the queue that we need those extra staff. So instead of taking it away from the children, I actually think for this year, because we kind of missed the boat on the budget, that we should probably accept what Councillors Shirelli and Hubley are suggesting and take it out of contingency, and then we should fix this going forward in the budget for future years. So that's my preference, but at the end of the day, it's getting a decision today so we can get on with the work is pretty fundamental. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Darash, please.
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I too represent an area that's growing very rapidly, and I can tell you there's great frustration, I think, in the community that the parks take so much time to be constructed. And it's difficult for residents to understand, because we put in the roads, we put in the sewers, we put in the street lights, we put in all the necessary infrastructure for the homes, and the parks are dead last. So I think the solution here is not what's being proposed. It's going back and looking fundamentally at how we build parks in the newer communities where there are tremendous growth pressures. I can tell you, Mr. Mayor, I've got several parks in a community called Finley Creek where At the end of the day, I think the community would have been happy with a meat and potatoes park that had all the fundamental elements and not one where we were striving to make every park different and unique. So I think there needs to be a bit of a culture change in our park planning branch to say, how are we going to get these parks completed as quickly as possible? Let's standardize some of the park elements and not have 2 or 3 year processes where the community is waiting for a park. So I think, and I've said this to Mr. Moser and to his people, that I think they need to look at how we build parks and streamline it and come up with a way that we're, again, not trying to customize every park, because when we do that, it gets complicated, it takes time, and at the end of the day, I think the residents are quite content, and I can tell you as a parent, I'm quite content when the core essentials, the meat and potatoes, are contained in the park. So again, I won't be supporting this because I think there's a much broader group thinking and evaluation that needs to be done within the park branch in terms of how we meet the needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chernyshenko, please.
As you may recall, it was me who got this whole thing rolling, and the motivation for that was quite simply the accumulating delays in getting work done. Work that the community had approved, we decided what we wanted to do, staff had agreed, but we couldn't get it through the system, the contracting, the design, for lack of staff resources. I'm somewhat torn here whether to go with the motion that came through from a planning committee yesterday, or this motion that, although defeated, had some support at planning committee. Most importantly, I want the message to be heard, as I believe it is being heard, that our parks should not come last, that the resources to do the design work, to do the spending of the cash in lieu parkland money, which is not a lot of money, that can be done in an efficient manner. So perhaps I'm speaking right now to say that let's reinforce that message. Let's take another look at how we do our parks planning and our cash in lieu spending. In the end, am likely to go with the 10% option, because I think that can be done quickly. And that's really the point. We're at that point now. I was at a community association meeting last night where I had to attempt to look upbeat and say with a smile that the 2 park benches, the 6 boulders, and the garbage can that we had approved last year might go in this spring or summer. That's not the sort of speed that one can be proud of. And I know we can do better if we have the people to take us through that process. So I am in the end going to support going with the 10% approach and not Councillor Shirelli's motion, although I certainly understand the motivation for it and the objective of sending a strong signal. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Hume put it as clearly as anyone could, that we're trying to get a level playing field here. And those who say that we should hire people to look after the ones that are from the grant and lieu money, if that's the case, then you're creating a greater disadvantage for the outlying communities where we have to cut things out of the park development because we are paying out of our DCs for staff instead of putting it into the actual park development for which the DCs were paid in the first place. And so if you're going to go that route, then the only way to be equal is that we'd have to hire staff to do all of the parks across the city and not use DC money in the outlying areas, and that would be a very major increase in cost to the city. So the only really logical way to go is to say, if you're using the money that comes for parks to pay for the planning of it in the outlying communities, then we should use the money that comes from the parks in the areas that have the grant in lieu of parkland in the same way. And that's what the motion from the planning committee says, and I support that motion. I think that's the way that we should be moving forward. It keeps a level playing field. I have no objection, however, to the request that we take a look at how we do our park planning. I think it's something we should do in any case, but that's a different situation and it will take longer. So this is a way to get moving now, see how it works, and if changes make later. But whatever we do, we should try to make sure that we don't disadvantage one part of the city over another by our actions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Monetz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarification on This motion, is this just to carry us until the next budget? Then, if we decide to put in an extra staff, that the motion will be not in effect for the year after?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there wasn't a specific parameter put on of that nature that it only be for this year. One of the concerns we have is that recruiting and retaining park planners is a challenge to start with, and if our ability to offer work is only for the spring and the summer, we will have trouble finding people that can take on this work. So at a minimum, I would say that the 2013 and 2014, getting us through the term of council, we suspect that there will be a lot of projects and a lot of work in this regard. But to answer your question, there wasn't a limit put on just for this year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Conseiller Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur Chénier. Moi, j'ai une question.
I have a question for you, Mr. Chénier. What we're talking about here is that we would like to have the parks planned and done as fast as possible when the money is available. Now we hear that there's a list. How long is that list? I'm sorry, I was not at committee meeting yesterday, but I don't seem to understand the problem here. You say that the employees are all dedicated to given parks, but what's the wait period? Mr. Mayor, this year for 2013, there are 70 projects on the list. Out of these 70, 23 have to do with parks and cash in lieu of parkland. So it's a fairly long list for this year. And in that list of 23 projects, or the 70, do you take into consideration the pressures that could come, for instance, from Section 37, which was amended last year? There could be other pressures, too. Does this list take all these elements into account? Yes, it does. Although Section 37 is not a source of pressure, really. The other pressure is the grant program in partnership with the community, the two minor and major programs. The two generate at least another some 20 more projects that are on the list. So you talked about 70 and 23 there for the parks. This is for this year only, or is this just a waiting list? It's the list of projects submitted last year, and which was not completed. It has been submitted since the end of the construction season last year, so they've been carried forward in 2013. We receive projects every week, so we expect that list to continue to grow. While the councillors are working with their communities to develop projects. So you're saying that these 70 projects are going to be carried forward this year, or will they take over a year to complete? This is the list that we have at hand now. So it has to be prioritized for the construction season this year. And we are giving this to the staff that we have now, and if council approves, we will, and today's request for 2 more staff, we will be able to get the cash in lieu of a grant for these parks.
Councillor Shirelli on closing comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have a number of temporary positions that get created at different times through this corporation. And this is one time where council at budget debated whether to do this. The budget process referred this item back to us at committee yesterday and then to council here today. Well, that would be a disingenuous referral if we were to say that the referral happens, but your outcome can't be funded by contingency, because by definition, when we refer an item from budget and don't make an exact provision for it, by definition we are saying that if we decide to do it, it's going to come from contingency or from another source equivalent to the contingency. Secondly, when we talk about the fairness of having development charges fund park projects, and that to add this motion into the mix would somehow reduce that, that's wrong. We are going to spend the same amount of development charge money on these projects as we would in either case. The only thing is, it's going to be going to provide play equipment, it's going to provide improvements to the park, it's not going to provide the ongoing staff person. So when you talk about equal treatment for all parts of the city, most residents parse that to mean that they will receive equal service levels. They don't really care how we juggle the numbers internally on our books to make that happen. When they want equal treatment, they want equal service levels. So, you know, I think that we have a decision today. We either go with the committee's recommendation yesterday, which basically will leave things pretty much the way they are. So if you don't like the speed with which we're dealing on these projects, you would vote for the committee recommendation. If you want to, as a policy alternative, improve that, then you would support this motion. I think it's important that we send that message. I think we need to, as a council, to send the message to staff and to the community that we're ready to make a change to make that happen, as small a change as it is. You know, this is not the magnitude of change you would see in past councils where you have millions and millions of dollars changing through the budget process. This is, in comparison to a multi-billion-dollar budget, a relatively small amount of money, but it achieves something. And, you know, at budget time, if we had dealt with this at budget time instead of referring it, then presumably we would have a contingency fund that would be $250,000 less, because we would have paid it out of the budget. We are spending the same amount of money. We're just making sure that it achieves a fairer level of service for everybody. So again, I hope you'll support it.
I hope you won't support it for a couple of reasons. First of all, I've certainly heard from members of council and the public that there's a need to improve the process of getting parks up and running. And I will undertake personally in the preparation of the 2014 budget to ensure that we have adequate resources to get the job done. Secondly, and I think Councillor DeRush raised this in terms of the sometimes extravagance that goes with park planning, I think we have to bring it down to a simpler process. And it's not a criticism of staff, because quite frankly, councillors go out to the community and the community has a great wish list. They want this, they want that. That prolongs the process, it puts the price up, and it becomes cost prohibitive, and then it keeps on the list. So I think we can work with staff through both the planning chair and the chair of Community and Protective Services, because there's a joint responsibility. But I would urge members of council not to support Councillor Shirelli's motion, because the easy thing to do is to always go to the citywide contingency. Well, the contingency should be reserved for more urgent one-time issues and not this kind of an expense. So I support what Councillor Hume said. I think he outlined the case very clearly, that we're all going to have an obligation in a park in our community to ensure that some of the funds go from your funds into that park that will stay in your community, and also that we have to speed up the overall process. So we're going to take this very seriously. I've heard the frustration the members of council have, and I certainly will give you my assurance that during the budget process you will see a positive change that I will propose in collaboration with the city manager and the deputy city manager. So on the motion, yeas and nays by Councillor Shirelli's. Yeah, on the motion by Councillor Shirelli and seconded by Councillor Hubely. Yeas and nays, please, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Councillor DeRoche?
No.
Councillor Moffat?
No.
Councillor El-Shantiri?
No.
Councillor Holmes? Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Conseiller Manette,
No.
Councillor Hobbs, Councillor Tierney,
Yes.
Councillor Taylor,
Nope.
Councillor Hughley,
Yes.
Councillor Harder, Councillor Wilkinson,
No.
Councillor McCrae,
No.
Councillor Clark,
No.
Councillor Eglai,
Yes.
Councillor Caudry,
No.
Conseiller Blais, Councillor Deans,
Yes.
Councillor Blois,
Ben non.
Conseiller Fleury,
No.
Councillor Hume,
No.
Councillor Chernyshenko,
Yes.
Councillor Thompson, Mayor Watson.
No.
6 yeas, 14 nays.
Okay, that's defeated on the main report. Carried. Motion to adopt reports. Motion portant adoption de rapport. Conseil Monette et Shirelli, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion by Councillor Monette, carried by Charlie. That the report from the Selection Panel Accessibility Advisory Committee entitled Appointment Accessibility Advisory Committee, the report from the Selection Panel Arts, Culture, Heritage and Recreation Advisory Committee entitled Appointments, Arts, Culture, Heritage and Recreation Advisory Committee, the report from the Selection Panel Built Heritage Subcommittee entitled Appointments, Built Heritage Subcommittee, the report from the Selection Panel Community Services Advisory Committee entitled Appointment, Community Services Advisory Committee, the report from the Selection Panel Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee entitled Appointments, Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee, the report from the Selection Panel French Language Services Advisory Committee entitled Appointment, French Language Services Advisory Committee, and then Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 28, Finance and Economic Development Committee Reports 28A and 29, Planning Committee Report 44, and Transportation Committee Report 43 be received and adopted as amended. Carried.
Deems a technical amendment to Paul Benoit driveway on suspension. Carried. Councillor El Chantier on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the last report, I heard a couple of my colleagues dissenting on it, and they barely made it to the clerk. So can the councillor who would like to dissent on something put their mic on so we would know and the rest of the clerk would know as well?
Yeah, I think that's important. If you're going to dissent on something, you can't whisper it to the clerk. You've got to say it at your table or it doesn't get recorded. So thank you for that. That's a good point, Councillor El Chantier. On suspension of the rules on Paul Benoit driveway, carried. Councillor Deans, introduction, pretty self-explanatory.
I think it's self-explanatory. It's just basically eliminating some confusion. The original name was Paul Benoit Private, and that denotes a rank of some form in the military. So just to clarify that, we're changing it to driveway.
Okay. On the motion, carried, adopté. Thank you. Motion from Councillor El Chantieri, seconded by Councillor DeRush, with respect to Councillor Blais' absence on suspension of the rules. Carried. Councillor El Chantieri, please, would you like to introduce and explain the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe we need a lot of introduction to this motion. Our heart goes to the family and our colleague Steve Blais, but this is from the clerk's office, Mr. Mayor. Therefore, be it resolved, the City Council authorized a leave of absence for Councillor Stephen Blais, and where further resolved that concurrence under the delegation of authority bylaw for Ward 19 matters may be given jointly by Councillor Rainer Blois and Bob Manette, and where be it further resolved that Council appoint Councillor Bob Manette to be the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee on interim basis, such as interim when Councillor Blais returned to take his seat on the committee. And be it further resolved that Council dedicate to the City Clerk and Solicitor and the Deputy City Clerk the interim authority to approve the payment of costs from the Ward 19 office budget only arising from routine bills, and in consultation with the Ward 19 office staff and Councillor Manette and Blowis for the annual seasonal event, their past practice for such a cost being paid can be established, if there's any sufficient funding within the budget to do so.
And on this, the Deputy Clerk has informed me that Councillor Blais is supportive of this, and we wish him continuous speedy recovery. And on the motion, and I thank Councillors Monette and Blowis for their stepping up to the plate. On the motion, carried. Thank you. Motions, are there any other motions requiring suspension of the rules? Notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meeting. Avis de motion pour examen à réunion subséquente. Notice of motion from Councillor Deans with respect to International Women's Day, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. And we'll deal with that at the next meeting, Councillor. Next motion, notice of motion from Councillor McCrae with respect to Plasco, seconded by Councillor Moffat. So we'll deal with that at the next meeting as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a notice of motion, gives us 2 weeks to contemplate, but it's with respect to the financial deadline coming up on the contract that we sign in December.
Thank you. Motion to introduce bylaws, Councillor Monette, seconded by Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Monette, please.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by Councillor Monette, seconded by Councillor Charelli, that the bylaws listed on the agenda on the motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings be read and passed. Carried. Règlement.
Please.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by Councillor Monette, seconded by Councillor Charelli, that the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of February 13, 2013. Carried.
Adjournment, Councillor Monette.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by Councillor Monette, seconded by Councillor Charelli, that the proceedings of City Council meeting of February 13, 2013 be adjourned. Carried.
Merci beaucoup. Meeting adjourned.